Welcome to AIJA's first virtual annual Congress, our 58th annual Congress devoted to diversity and inclusion. It's great to see you all here. I invite you to imagine a young boy with his mother and two siblings arriving at a rainy train station in London 73 years ago. The young boy is my father. He and his family arrived from Poland via Vienna to join my grandfather, who had been stationed for most of World War II with a Polish regiment in Scotland. No, you're not about to hear my family history, but I do want to share a few moments in my life which have shaped my vision on diversity and go some way towards explaining my passion for this topic, to which you as AIJA members have devoted your commitment and energy this year. I feel lucky that my grandfather chose the UK as his adopted homeland. That decision has offered me the immeasurable privilege to have grown up in London, one of the most multicultural and diverse cities in the world. I went to a girls' school where two of my closest friends were from Lebanon and Israel. My friend from Lebanon fled the civil war in the 1980s to the UK with her family, including her father, a high-profile journalist. She is now head of the maths department at a school in Cambridge. My friend from Israel is also a first-generation Londoner with close ties to her relatives in Israel and the US. She is now an independent art consultant, curator, and writer. Maybe it was our diverse backgrounds that brought us together, which admittedly are not unusual in any London school. But our friendship meant that from the tender age of 11, I was exposed to a glimpse inside the political, cultural, and historical debate that these two friends experienced each day at their family dinner table. Their ability to engage in some gentle sparring about the challenging relations between their home countries from 11 years of age till 18, believe me, it was impressive, exemplified how people from diverse backgrounds and cultures can live, work, go to school side by side, and indeed choose to be friends. Moving on, and a decade later, I was introduced to an organisation which has undoubtedly shaped my view of the world and brought me even more forcefully face to face with the power of difference, or diversity. It's difficult to recall how it came to be that one hot summer in the university holidays, I found myself on a bus heading to the south of France to one of the most iconic Catholic shrines to the Virgin Mary. Lourdes is a tiny mountain village in the Pyrenees, which would have remained tucked away from the global stage if it hadn't been for the fact that 160 years ago, a 14-year-old girl called Bernadette reported apparitions of the Virgin Mary. Since then, the mountain village is invaded by millions of pilgrims from all over the world who come to pay their respects. Many make the journey in the hope of a miracle. So imagine a group of 200 18 to 30-year-olds. 2/3 of the group are volunteers with no formal medical training. The other third of the group are people, friends, with a variety of physical and mental disabilities. All of us have one thing in common: a week away from home and the daily routine to have as much fun as possible on as little sleep as possible. Good training for my AIJA life, as it turns out. It was a simple brief, a daily programme planned to the minute, set out in our survival guide known as the Red Book. Aside from a team of medics and a handful of priests and nuns, the pilgrimage was managed by a 20-something-year-old chairman and a group of Equipe, or team leaders. It's an acquired taste and not everyone returns. Those of us who did return were invariably hooked for life, or more brutally, until we turned 30, when it was time to hand over the reins to the next generation. Sounds familiar, right? It's perhaps no coincidence that my first AIJA event happened when I was 29, ready to turn my energy to a new project. The point is that through this organisation, all of us were offered a different lens through which to view the world. We learnt to see differences, such as disability, whether visible or invisible, as a strength, an alternative perspective on the world. It helped us to think about going beyond our limitations. It also taught us about being on a level playing field and treating the person next to us, regardless of their differences, with mutual respect and dignity. One of my fondest memories, which seems appropriate to share with you today, as it involves a roller coaster, which is the perfect metaphor for this presidency, and an experience with my friend Matt. Matt experienced a brain hemorrhage in his 20s, which left him in a wheelchair with limited speech. However, he has the most expressive eyes and the naughtiest sense of humour. We were on a holiday camp in Wales, and one of the days out involved a theme park. I'm not a great fan of roller coasters, but the rule is that volunteers and guests all stick together. So if Matt wants to go on the roller coaster, there was no way I was going to persuade him otherwise. Absolutely petrified, I tried to encourage him to go without me with another pair of friends, but he wouldn't have it. "I'll look after you," his eyes said, and he did. As we took to the skies in a series of loop-the-loops and my stomach going in directions I never thought possible, Matt kept hold of my hand throughout. And the irony was that this simple gesture enabled me to fully embrace that experience, even if I'm in no rush to repeat it. And like many experiences in this organisation, it offered the privilege of pushing the boundaries and experiencing life to the fullest. So how does this fit with AIJA, apart from the obvious parallels of forging lifelong connections and experiences with friends from around the world on minimum sleep? Our association is naturally diverse, with 4,000 members from 90 countries. A good example of our commitment to geographic diversity is our November half-year conference in Miami, which offered an opportunity to showcase our association to existing and new members in the Americas. With record-breaking sponsorship and over 200 participants, of which 2/3 came from the Americas, the event represented a significant milestone towards our strategic objective of growing our association's membership in the region. This week, we were meant to be in Rio at our 58th annual Congress, which would have brought each of you, our members, to an iconic city in South America, where we would have enjoyed the colourful and vibrant Brazilian hospitality and an unforgettable programme put together by our energetic Rio Congress team. Although we have to wait a little while longer for that moment, when AIJA finally returns to Rio, it'll be all the more special and memorable. I cannot wait. Our leadership positions are held in equal measure by women and men. There have been 5 female presidents of the association in the last decade, with a 6th standing for election at our General Assembly. This week also marks the launch of the AIJA Women Network, with an inaugural session focusing on identifying and counteracting bias. Our association prides itself on its inclusive culture, and this is an initiative to take inclusion to the next level by offering an interactive forum to explore the challenges and opportunities faced by women in the legal profession. During the past 5 months, our weekly virtual coffee with the President offered an opportunity for our members to connect more informally, as well as to hear from guest speakers on a variety of issues connected with diversity and inclusion. Those discussions offered an opportunity to address, for example, the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement in our countries, law firms, and in our communities. To mark our association's 58th birthday on the 1st of July, over 170 members from 24 countries participated in a world tour challenge to raise over €5,000 for ILGA, an international association championing LGBTQIA rights. And now this year closes with a historic moment for our association with our first virtual annual Congress, where our academic programme of 9 working sessions, together with our panel of guest speakers at this opening session, focuses on diversity and inclusion. But our commitment to this issue does not end with this AIJA year. The appointment of our first diversity officer means that our association is actively committed to diversity and inclusion now and in the future to continue our journey of improvement. So in conclusion, I invite each of you to respond to this call of action. Lawyers have a voice to which others listen. Let's make ourselves heard. Let's use our platform, as we are doing today, to discuss difficult issues with colleagues in the workplace, in society, with our families, and with the next generation of lawyers. I shared with you the enormous impact of Matt holding my hand on that roller coaster. Are you ready to metaphorically hold a colleague's hand to address an uncomfortable situation in your work environment? Perhaps you could consider being openly anti-racist in an environment where there is prejudice or bias. Let's take advantage of this inclusive and supportive AIJA environment to hold each other accountable and to interact with other lawyers in an inclusive way. and let's make everyone feel welcome and included, like the young boy and his family who arrived in his adopted homeland 73 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula, for your inspiring words and also for having led our organization this year so extraordinarily in circumstances which have been unprecedented for sure. Thank you so much. Today, the AIJA Human Rights Committee has the honor of hosting the plenary session of AIJA's 58th Annual Congress. Under the umbrella of this year's main Congress theme, which is diversity, this plenary session will focus on why diversity, inclusion, and social justice matter for the empowerment of individuals, organizations, and societies. This is a subject that we take to heart as a Young Lawyers organization and that we are keen on exploring further with our great panel today.
Thank you, Gülsüm, for this inspiring introduction. We have esteemed speakers joining us today, and we feel so lucky and privileged to host them at this session. Our first speaker is Julie Orr, attending to our panel from London. Julie is the External Affairs Director at Social and Sustainable Capital. Prior to joining SASC, she worked in youth services where she helped charities take on social investments, allowing them to scale their work. Before that, Julie spent 14 years in journalism at the BBC. She has a master's degree on inequality and social sciences from London School of Economics. Apart from these, Julie volunteers on projects run by Order of Malta that supports marginalized communities across the globe.
Our next speaker today is Marina Gonzaroli, who will be attending our session from Sao Paulo. Marina is a lawyer and she's also an AIJA member. She currently works for various companies and institutions as an independent consultant specialized on cultural compliance, women's rights, and diversity. Marina has her master's degree on gender legislative production in Brazil and currently conducts her PhD research on sexual gender-based violence. Marina is a co-founder of multiple feminist organizations and is also a state councillor for Sao Paulo State Bar and the president of its Commission on Sexual Diversity and Gender.
Our third and last speaker is a well-known AIJA member, Rashika Scott. She is a senior legal counsel, global IP and technology lead at Fondia in Finland with over 10 years of legal experience. She is also a board member of UNICEF Finland and has founded Black Professionals Finland, which is a collective for Black professionals working in Finland. In addition, Rashika has co-founded Juvomme Helsinki, where she mentors young ladies between 18 to 24 years old. She has her law degree at the University of Bristol and LLM degree at the University of Helsinki. We would now like to give our speakers the floor for further introductions of themselves and for their presentations. Julie, can we start with you?
Hello, and thank you very much for allowing me to join you today. Before I tell you a bit about myself, I'm actually going to share some slides and tell you a little bit about why I woke up this morning lucky. So this morning I woke up lucky because I'm white, I'm able-bodied, I'm part of the major religion in this country, I'm straight, I'm not pregnant, I'm not married, I'm not going through or considering gender reassignment, and I'm 42 years old and a member of Generation X. I also woke up lucky this morning because I'm middle class, I have the right accent, I own a house in London, and I have a job with a permanent contract. Now, I suspect that many of you listening this morning could have compiled a similar list when you woke up, but I suspect that you didn't. And it's my contention that people like us don't understand how we are privileged on just so many fronts. We will never fix the problems of inequality and lack of diversity in our workplace and communities otherwise. So how did I choose these multiple identities that I considered myself lucky upon this morning? Well, the UK Equalities Act was after decades of analysing where there was bias and discrimination in the UK, the government here finally created what they called the UK Equalities Act in 2010. This set out a number of protected characteristics that it felt should be protected by law. The Act went on to lay out where and when you should be protected, and you can see these all on your screens now. Now, obviously it's fantastic that the UK wanted to protect people and their rights, and that this country had recognised that we as individuals have innate bias and prejudice that led to consistent forms of discrimination that could be identified and checked. It's also obviously a tragedy that we needed the Act in the first place, but at least we now know. But in my view, the Act is really just the first start. In order to deal with discrimination, we all need to take personal responsibility for being part of society, where our structures unintentionally leave some people and groups on the outside. Unintentional barriers are created by the people who make up the system, because they have unconscious prejudice on all of these characteristics in the Equalities Act, which result in our perceptions being balanced towards those you know and understand. So it's incumbent on you all to recognise the multiple identities that make up the single entity that is you, and recognise the part they play in your daily life. Now, the younger generations, of which sadly I'm no yet longer a part, but they've been criticised for becoming too individualistic and therefore not having community spirit. But I'd argue that that's wrong, entirely wrong. In order to understand communities and to work out how they work for everyone, not just those who are in charge and define them, we must become more individualistic and think of ourselves and our multiple identities. If I truly want to improve diversity in my workplace, and by the way, there's increasing amounts of research that shows it makes financial sense as much as anything to do so, then I have to understand that there are multiple ways in which I might get better treatment than my fellow citizens. To me, the UK Equalities Act doesn't go far enough. At the beginning, I told you about the other reasons why I woke up lucky. I told you I'm middle class, I've got the right accent, I have a house in London and a permanent job. In the UK, the Act doesn't cover class, which has been a preeminent obsession of the Brits for, well, forever. And it doesn't cover wealth, which in my view is the defining feature of inequality in this century. It's my opinion that on these points too, we need to constantly be recognising our privilege and luck. So now about me and how my luck got me to where I am today. I went to a public school, which here is a private school, and then to a Russell Group university, and the Russell Group are the 20 best UK universities. I began my career at Vatican Radio, reading the news to a global audience. And the story of how I got there is a fun one, but suffice it is to say that I never doubted if I was good enough for the job. My education had taught me that I was worth it. After 4 years in Rome, I returned to London and decided I wanted to work at the BBC. I emailed all my friends and asked, who do I know that works at the BBC? And it transpired that a university acquaintance sister did. She became my boss, offering me a job on the most prestigious news programme at the BBC. At the time, I didn't question it. I thought, I'm a great hire for this job. Pope John Paul II was clearly in his final years, and having someone with those Vatican connections would be great for the programme. But the truth is, I got that job because of my networks, because I got myself a coffee with the right woman with whom I had loads in common, who gave me a week of free interning because I was wealthy enough to be able to work for free, so that I could demonstrate my skills and then land a job outside of any sort of formal recruitment system. And yeah, I'm sure they did offer me a job based on my experience, but it was my privilege that got me through the door. I spent 15 years as a journalist, travelling the world, reporting on inequality and injustice around the globe. And the more I saw, the more I realised that here in the UK, we haven't fixed it at all. And I want to fix it. I wanted to fix it. So I studied for a Master's in Inequalities and Social Science at the LSE. And since then, I've worked in charity finance, trying to create financing structures for charities that allow them to safely scale and sustainably do so that they can do more in their local communities. So that's me. I'm incredibly lucky. My privilege extends across both protected and unprotected characteristics of the UK Equalities Act. And I hope in this session that my fellow panelists and I can persuade you that you have not just a personal responsibility, but a duty if we're to get serious about inequality and discrimination, to constantly recognise our own privilege and fight to change the environment so that people who aren't like us can enjoy it too.
Thank you so much, Dilly, for your inspiring presentation, for your thought-provoking presentation as well. And we're really looking forward to discussing these matters further during our panel discussions in a few minutes. Then now I would like to give the floor to Marina for her introduction of herself and her presentation.
Hi everyone, it is a pleasure and an honor to join you all at the 58th International Association of Young Lawyers opening session about empowering our future, why diversity, inclusion, and social justice matter. My name is Marina Ganzaroli, and what my introduction didn't mention is that as a state counsel in São Paulo state bar, I'm actually the youngest and only LGBT community representative among 200 attorneys on the council, a council that represents 400,000 lawyers. No wonder that Brazil has more lawyers per capita than the United States. I couldn't afford not to mention that I have been working directly with gender-based violence survivors for over a decade now, and that my accumulated experience of doing so has made me a far more expert on diversity and inclusion than all my degrees combined. Besides the importance of intersectionality between academia and activism throughout my career, I would add a third factor to the equation, which is my professional experience outside university. I had the privilege of becoming a municipal council on Children's and Adolescents Council and also at the Social Assistance Council of São Paulo, and working in São Paulo's City Hall and at the Municipal Audit Court, where I was involved on the auditing of over $1 billion public contract for the city's lighting with only 20 years old. This experience with anti-corruption policies and compliance measures on public contracts, combined with my studies on gender and my activism and volunteer work with survivors and advocacy work for women's and diversity laws, lead me to what I can say proudly successful place I am today. So instead of sharing with you several things that I did throughout my career, I wanted to tell you a bit of the core principles of this path on my presentation, because sometimes I feel that a more experienced generation of attorneys that came previously to us think that working with diversity and inclusion or women's rights, it's a minor or a less privileged law career. So I wanted to tell you briefly my journey to inspire even young attorneys to do the same. As a young lesbian lawyer from the Global South, I am proud to represent Brazil on this panel. So I would like to thank you on the name of AIJA's president, Paola Fudakowska, for the invitation to be here today.
Thank you so much, Marina. Thank you, and we're really happy to have you on board and to be able to also discuss these matters during our panel discussion later on in this session. Then now I would like to give the floor to Rashika Scott. Rashika, for your introduction, your further introduction of yourself and your presentation, here's the floor for you.
Thank you very much, Kulsum, and thank you, ladies, for a wonderful and super inspiring start to this session. I am, of course, it goes without saying, extremely honored to be talking about this on the 10th anniversary of my AIJA journey. Can you hear me well?
We can.
Wonderful. I'll just share my slides over here. I just have a few things that I would like to maybe start off with. In my presentation here, or in my approach today, will very much be focused on sort of a learning journey towards belonging, right? And that's what I've taken as my subtitle for my presentation. Just a little bit about me. I am Jamaican. I always start with that. I'm very, very proud. I am a forever island girl. I am also the daughter of a semi-professional footballer who got lost in Finland. People always ask me this. And I'm also that little girl who at 8 years old took the plane on her own from Jamaica to move to Finland and go and start in a Finnish school in the autumn. So I'm very much used to being the only one, the diverse one, but always, forever, the very brave island girl. Now, when I put together my slides here, I was thinking, why do I want to put like a CV? I am so much more than everything, you know, that we usually put on the CV. I've done this degree, I've done that. I suppose it's just to show that I have been around. You know, I have the accreditation, as you will. I have been to the Russell Group University. I have studied also in Finland, because people tend to ask about that in the same sentence as they ask, are you adopted? Do you speak Finnish? Do you fluently speak Finnish? And all the other questions that you see here on the side. In addition to lawyering, it is what I do, but I feel like it is a form of activism as well. Just existing as a Black lawyer in Finland and in other spaces as the Black Finnish Jamaican lawyer, for example, at AIJA sessions, it's been a trip and it's been wonderful. And of course, it requires some bravery, as you know. In addition to that, I've founded, as you said, Ulko, Black Professionals Finland. It was born out of a frustration and frankly loneliness that I felt this spring. I thought to myself, there must be others who want to come together and find a safe space. So I did that. And the mentoring, this is about something that I find that I can do to empower the next generation. So I have a mix of both Finnish, mixed cultured, Black, white, Muslim, Christian, young ladies there. And I try to provide a safe space where they can really talk about and ask difficult questions, not only about race, but especially this spring, we talked about race a lot. And I made them tell me all their prejudice and just have that space for that. I have been an AIJA member, as I said, for 10 years now, over 10 years, and I am absolutely encouraged and honored that, that such a dear organization to me has devoted this Congress to such an important topic. It's not lost on me, and it's not lost on me how the fellow colleagues, lawyers that I've seen over the years, that they still show up for something like this. It really means a lot. So thank you very much for that. What I thought that I would start with today is just to say that for me, terms matter. So I wanted to speak about, and I welcome the discussion that we'll have in the panel, about the difference between diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Because often people might think, oh, we have one Black person, or we have one woman on the board, or we have, you know, just the mere presence as a sort of box ticking exercise. It's just not sufficient. So the visuals are no longer, they were never sufficient, but especially now, we are tired. So diversity, the mere presence of someone. As I like to say, diversity is being at the dance, right? So you imagine a dance, because we all know I like to dance. I'm always dancing at AIJA. So diversity is being at the dance, and then inclusion would be being invited to dance once you're there. And then the belonging part would be wanting to dance. And I think there's a stark difference between all these three terms in terms of commitment, the creativity that you can unleash. And that's why it's important to distinguish those terms. And I look forward to speaking more on that today. And as for this last part, just to sort of have in your mind that when we are speaking, reflect on the role that you can play. As Jilly so beautifully put it, we all have certain identities. How are you existing in the spaces that you are existing in? What are the systems that you can affect? Maybe as a lawyer, you might not go into education, but perhaps if you're a teacher, you might want to ask the schools, what are you doing on your diversity training? So that's something that I would like to talk about, look forward to talking about today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rashika. And thanks to all our speakers, even the power and harmony in you evidence that diversity matters and diversity is really important. And now we are reached the end of our presentation session, and we would like to start our panel discussions. So, Jilly, the first question is to you. We know that social class and classism also comes with privilege, as you also mentioned during your introduction speech. So how does middle class privilege manifest itself?
So I think my answer to this follows very neatly on from Rashika's presentation, because middle class privilege is having organised the dance, chosen who was invited, and then deciding what food's on the menu as well. You can be as inclusive and as wonderful a host as you like, but you had the privilege to have the party in the first place. So middle class privilege, in essence, is really about how you acknowledge or recognise that you had the power to send out the invitations. I suppose class is a very specific point of interest in Britain, so perhaps I should address that first of all. In the UK, we have three acknowledged classes: upper, middle, lower, or working class, and these are basically used in society as a way of understanding where you sit, where you fit in society. There are some classic comedy sketches about class in the UK because we're obsessed by it, and I do recommend the Monty Python one, for example. Of course, things are never very simple. There are kind of gradations of class within the UK. I'm upper middle class, which means I enjoy the privileges of the middle class. I own my own house and I have an office job, but I'm also at the upper edges because of the sort of money that I have. And you know, this goes back to what I said in my opening statement. There's many ways in which that privilege manifests itself. I think the serious point about class is that it's used as a way of keeping people in their place and allowing them in turn to protect their space from others. So many countries have similar structures, all really with the intention of maintaining that status quo. So middle class privilege, in my view, goes back to this idea of waking up lucky. I'm never going to find myself being discriminated against, by and large, because I conform to the majority. And I mentioned that class and wealth weren't protected characteristics in the UK, and I would argue that they are, in fact, the primary tools that the upper and middle classes in society use to run it to their liking. In the UK, we have systemic inequality that falls outside any of the law that's set in this country. I mean, you guys are the lawyers, not me, so you'll know this better than me, but in and of themselves, our systems here promote fair hirings, open policies, meritocracy, and kind of career attainment. But the truth is that we know that the systems work in the favour of the upper middle classes like me, who run the companies and government. And yet we know statistically that I will earn more and rise up the ranks more quickly than someone who is poor or black or not able-bodied. And I can tell you that I'm great, as I said in my opening statement, that I'm hired in my experience, but deep down I do know that I'm lucky, and that's part of what got me to where I am. Rashika also, and both Marina as well, talked about this idea of intersectionality. And that is where the protected characteristics kind of come into play, because I'm lucky on all those individual points, but I'm hugely lucky when they all intersect in my favour, when they combine, the power of those protected characteristics is stronger as a whole. So the converse is also true. So when someone's unlucky or discriminated against because of one characteristic, e.g. race, I suppose, they're much more likely to be discriminated against on one of those many other characteristics like religion, and the impact of that discrimination is worth when it intersects. It's compound bad luck for the economists in the room. And that's, I suppose, where the middle class gets it wrong. It says, I'm not doing anything discriminatory. I'm running the system as the law says. And you'll often hear that classic phrase, I don't even see colour or religion or race or gender. I only hire an experience. But you have to be aware of how that compounded bad luck works against an individual from birth. And so I think, you know, to look at the way privilege manifests itself is to understand how the majority views normal. And so experience in the workplace is judged through the prism of these multiple identities, because middle class normal says that someone went to Eton, which is the school where Prince William went, then to Oxford University, and then probably to a major bank in the city, that is great experience. When you travel that path, you're expected to be a success before you've even walked through the door, even before any of your skills are tested. People have made a judgment on that middle class privilege, not a judgment on you and your skills. And so we have to, as individuals and members of the middle classes, recognize that that's the case, recognize that's our internal bias, those are our perceptions, and we judge even without recognizing it based on these individual identities and our perceptions of what, you know, the normal compared to my experience is, and then what we feel comfortable with. And so one of my colleagues on this panel, I can't remember who, said it's about waking up every day and going through an uncomfortable experience. And I think, Paola, that was actually you, and I think it's absolutely right. This is an uncomfortable conversation, because every time as a member of the middle class, you are made to see that experience and skill looks slightly different to you. It makes you feel uncomfortable because it challenges the perceptions you've built up. And so, yeah, for me, middle class privilege is something that is ingrained in just how our everyday actions and beliefs take place.
Thank you, Julie. Rashika, you wanted to respond to that.
I do. Actually, very recently, it just came to my mind that it also manifests itself as in the children of people who are in the middle class, with the possibility to actually, for example, study in peace and not having to work, for example, several jobs, which of course frees up time for you to do better at university. And then I have to say that because this has been a very personal journey, and I'm asking, for example, all of my friends who are also middle class to undertake anti-racist behavior, I am also reflecting on my own behavior. And I have to say that being middle class has got me a long way as well. So I have been protected by being educated, being at the right schools. For example, UNICEF job, it was the task of, let's say, 4 white women. I would love to think that I did something right, and I surely did. But basically, the story goes that one saw me, recommended me to a headhunter, and then the 3 of them, the headhunter and then the 2 people on the selection committee, believed in me. So I just thought that, in all honesty and transparency, I am being helped, right? So this is a collaborative effort, and the doors have been opened for me as well, and I am protected also as a middle class.
Thank you, Rashika. Well, then there is another question that actually draws on the one that we asked first, and it's actually related to the same topic, because there is privilege, there are individuals that are privileged, and there is systemic inequality, of course, and to change that, something's needed. Empathy, maybe, being able to see that someone else doesn't have, that you have privilege. It's important to acknowledge that, and to see that another one doesn't have that. But the question to you, Marina, is, do you think that the standpoint that we have, so that our own standpoint could limit us in our capacity when we want to address these issues, these diversity and inclusion related issues.
Thank you, Gulsum, for bringing that up. I actually gonna establish a dialogue in this answer with Rashika and Jilly. When Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, U.S. lawyer, philosopher, and civil rights advocate, coined the term intersectionality over 30 years ago, she was referring to a theoretical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities as gender, sex, race, class, sexuality, religion, ability, physical appearance, age, nationality, and other markers of social difference might combine to create unique models of discrimination and privilege. There is no hierarchy on privilege and oppression. It's not a competition. They are intercrossed and overlapped. Intersectionality identifies advantages and disadvantages that are felt by people to a combination of factors. So and let me just share here really fast my presentation. So when I addressed in my introduction some of the social difference markers that cross my life experience as a woman, I did so with a purpose. I am a Latin white in Brazil and perceived as white, and several privileges come with that. I am a woman, a lesbian, young lawyer, which means I can read and write in a country where 6.6% or 11 million of the population are analphabet, which means I had the class privilege to access the university and even had the privilege of learning a second, a third, and a fourth language. There isn't an universal woman. The word woman or man is incapable to describe every woman's experience. There are so many social difference markers that we can account for. Look, in this discussion, it's very important to stress that out. By privilege, I don't mean that I or you didn't have merit on accomplishing the things we did. I'm only saying that our privileges shape the difficult, the obstacles that some are going to face in this path and some won't. There is no shame on being a white, middle-class, cisgendered, heterosexual man from an European country. Everybody has a standpoint. The importance of understanding yours resides on understanding your social place in your community and in the world. You shouldn't be ashamed of that. Locating yourself and understanding your standpoint is actually the ethical thing to do. Your personal opinion is biased by your experiences. I had the privilege to learn from Professor Djamila Ribeiro, a thriving Brazilian Black feminist and philosopher, when we were giving the training together for all the justice officers of the state of São Paulo, she and race and me and sexual diversity, that not only should I talk about races as a white Brazilian woman, as I must talk about races, because I am a part of the problem. I have to be a part of the solution. And that works for all social difference markers. If you're a man, you must talk about sexism. And as a heterosexual, about homophobia. But you must talk from your standpoint, from your perspective and experience. I have never been stopped by the police violently. I have never been chased by a security on a supermarket. No one ever questioned my hairstyle on a job interview. That is my place. And I can talk about that as long as I place and locate my standpoint. We receive 11 million bits of information every second, but we can only consciously process 40 bits, meaning 99.6% of our mental processing is unconscious. So guess what? You're biased. So am I. The main factor that affects our ability to respond to discriminatory conducts is bias. Every second, we receive an enormous amount of information, and it's impossible to process all of it. So in order to function, we each rely on mental shortcuts, known as implicit bias, that help us make automatic associations. Our brains are constantly working to look at the world around us, notice patterns, and make generalizations. These stereotypes affect our understanding of events, our decisions, and our responses unconsciously. For example, most of us were socialized to believe that only males that perform an hegemonic masculinity, it's important to say, are in the position to be CEOs. So when we recognize these implicit biases, we are able to say, oh, I see that I'm thinking like that, and that's not helpful to the situation. Let me put that aside and listen to what other person is telling me. The more we explore these implicit biases, the more we can recognize where it may be negatively impacting on others. So what does this mean? It means that we're all biased. It's not on its essence a bad thing to be biased. It helps our brain to work in our decision-making process. But implicit biases have a downside. Because they're automatic, they operate outside of our awareness, meaning they can be in direct contradiction to our beliefs and values, but still influence our judgment and behavior. So bringing up a little bit of Rashika's metaphor in the dance, and Julie talking about the hosting of the dance, I would like to dialogue with this metaphor. We're going through a worldwide pandemic. Brazil just reached 100,000 deaths, and there's a metaphor I've been using a lot, and I think that dialogues with this one of the dancing, of hosting the dance, which is not only in the context of the pandemic, but in life. We're all going through this storm, but we are not in the same boat. There are some people that are hanging on a piece of wood. There are some people that have a floating boat. There are some people that have a motorboat, and there are some people that have a yacht. It is indeed the same storm, but our backgrounds are very different. So I would like to stop here so we can keep discussing, but I think it's important that we consider which bodies arrive in places before their mind, before their intellect. A woman's body, a Black body, an LGBT body, a person with disability. Those are the people that are judged before they even open their mouth. So I would like to bring this reflection or panel into our discussion.
It was amazing, Marina. Thank you so much. So many questions pop up in our brains for sure. We need to question them a lot. Do you want to add anything, Julie or Rashika? Of course.
Marina, I have to say, I love your passion, really. I think I will come to Brazil as soon as this thing is over. It's beautiful to see people who are allies, who genuinely are committed to this matter. It's very hopeful, so thank you for that. In terms of standpoint, I'm happy that you mentioned this idea of shame. So what I find with, for example, in this discussion about racism is that a lot of white people, my friends, especially my colleagues, shame stops them from taking action, from even engaging, from even letting me know, checking in on me and telling me that they care about me. You know, shame stops them from actually picking up a book because they're completely ashamed of even being white, right? Now, that is not, shame is an absolutely useless sentiment for me in many areas of life, but also this one. Leave the shame behind, right? Let's get to work. Once you have accountability and understanding of that standpoint that you do have, right? And that you don't take over the discussion as if you're speaking from experience. That is what we, for example, in anti-racist discourse find offensive. You are speaking as if the pain is yours. That is not the case. But every other standpoint is acceptable, right? And I just want to share in terms of, if you think about where you stand. So what could be my role, for example? As a lawyer or as a private person, it doesn't matter. I have read this thing, and none of these ideas are original. I am learning as I go along, but I found something very useful. I can't even remember who wrote it, but it's about system changes. And I found it useful that the idea is that you should place yourself in a role, right? There's a system change. There's a role that you could assume. Now, what we have going on the theater tonight, we have the stewards that keep a system going, right? Then we have storytellers who sort of paint a beautiful picture of that anti-racist, equal, just, fair society. What is going to be emerging from all the hard work that we're doing. Then you have the midwife, third, helping to give birth to this new system, right? And then you have the hospice workers who are trying to help put to bed the old system. They are, essentially helping to ease the grip of those who are clutching with their bare knuckles to an old system and just will not accept that the diversity that we have here, it's here to stay, and it is actually a positive thing, right? So take your standpoint, pick your role. You might be several roles, and see what you can honestly, authentically do, depending on matters that are seriously and personally important to you. That would be my take from the standpoint and a role aspect.
Thank you so much, Rashika, for this great input. And another question is coming to you, Rashika. And we have so many terms here. First we have diversity and inclusion. Now every organization wants everyone feel like they belong to that organization. So belonging is coming up. One of the articles I read, it was saying that diversity is a fact and inclusion is behavior, but feeling belonging to is an emotion. So the question is coming is that why it is important to distinguish between merely having diversity and inclusion versus belonging.
Well, why is it indeed? As I said before, so diversity, the difference between the three terms imply that there is a different, they evoke very different levels of creativity, contribution, and commitment, right? And they include for me different levels of empathy and accountability. So with diversity now, I find that being at the dance, so you think that you have one black bloke at work and that is it, we are good, but representation is just the first step, right? It is just there. If you leave it at that as a company, we can feel extremely lonely and we feel that we locked out in getting this position. So it actually can be quite traumatic on its own. So you open the door, but we're kind of just in the room. We're not invited to the table. We're not included. We're not invited to dance. So you can actually, you're just standing there, representing, being held as the figurehead when it's appropriate, when the company's D&I initiatives are called into question. Now, with inclusion, it can it is being invited to dance, right? But I would like to dance how I like to dance. I don't want to dance how you expect me to dance. And that is also what happens very often. So I have, for the most of my career, felt that, especially in Finland, I have been included. I have been given certain roles. I have met clients. You know, I haven't been kept in the back room or anything. This is serious talk. But I felt like I wasn't able to be my full self, perhaps there, right? And amongst Black women, for example, we have this running joke where we have two personalities. One, we're in a white space when our hair is like bone straight, etc. And then when we're with the Black people, right? It would be lovely to really merge those so that we get to the belonging part. So we are diverse, no one's hiding it, no one's colorblind, we're okay to be whatever we are. I am of course speaking from race because I'm speaking authentically from my own, but this applies to several other areas as well. So we are there, they're not colorblind to us, no one is saying all lives matter, all colors matter, and that's kind of passive aggressive nonsense. We have been included, so we are in the boardrooms, we are team leaders. For example, I'm now leading the global team at Fondia. That is really important to me. So my point of view and how I decide to lead a team of white people in 4 countries, you know, I'm getting comfortable with that idea. Now, there's the belonging, the empowerment, right? Once you have the seat at the table. So you started making some decisions around here. You were starting to put in and tap into that creativity from which we're going to get all the benefits of having that diversity there. So we can't have silent women in the board. That doesn't, we're not there for decoration, for example. So that is the whole point of that. So different levels of creativity, contribution, commitment, and then empathy and accountability. Belonging shows the highest sense of empathy for me, and also evokes in turn commitment from me, commitment to the work, to my colleagues, to the community, to country. For example, if we think of immigrants, and who would not want to benefit from that?
Yuki, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. The next question will be to Jilly Yusuf.
Yes, actually, I think this is going to be our final question. So in that respect, we are kind of running out of time. So in view of the time that we have left, I would actually like to ask all our panelists what they think that how they think that we can show allyship in the workplace that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Well, shall I start and just pick up on Rashika said? In fact, I think there are 2 points, and I'm coming from my, you know, not to labour the point, but my place of white middle class privilege. I think the number 1 point is about not co-opting the shame, because that is so crucial. It stops you doing anything, and it makes it about me or us as, you know, as the majority in the country. That is just the wrong response. And also, again, it's not a useful tool. I would say that allyship in the workplace is really about being proactive. So we've moved from a point, maybe even, you know, just a few years ago, where it was totally all right to say, I'm not racist. And that's a true statement. I'm not a racist. The way I act and the way I think, I'm not a racist, but I did nothing about it. And we have, I think, moved to a point, and I think what the global Black Lives Matter movement has shown is that sitting around and doing nothing is no longer acceptable. You have to step up and you have to be proactive about protecting the rights of everyone and acknowledging those multiple identities how they intersect and how they benefit you and how they don't benefit others, and making sure that you, in your small area of responsibility, can really take ownership of making change. And I think I sense that, and I feel that we are on the right trajectory, but it is a personal duty to take that. And the other point from Rashika that I would pick up is, I think one of the things that often we find hard as someone who's now anti-racist, no longer just not racist, is how to deal with people who are racist. I think that's really problematic. And one of the things that I would point out, certainly in British discourse about this, is this use of a what about question. It's the easiest tactic used by someone who is wants to discriminate. So you say, gosh, wasn't it awful that the police stopped and searched that black young man for no good reason? And they will say, yeah, but what about the time when the cops stopped a white kid for no good reason? And you say, okay, well, on educational attainment, sometimes it'll go, isn't it actually, it's really good. In the UK, we've shown that children from black and minority ethnic backgrounds are now doing better at exams. And they say, yeah, but what about boys from white poor communities that are lagging behind? And I think this what about questions shuts down the conversation. It's really hard to counteract that, because it turns this debate from one where you can help distinct groups, and it's bringing everyone up together, and it's based on quantifiable evidence of discrimination, and says that you can see where you want to help. But the result of these whatabouters means that it becomes a question of winners or losers, as though there's a finite pie to go around and you can't discriminate to give unequal portions to some groups over others. And I think the truth is that it's not about equality in terms of slice of some imaginary pie, because there is no pie. It's about equity. It's about saying that for some people to get to the point where they have the same life as you, they need some help to get there. And my privilege allows me to get here without any help. But for others to get there, they need assistance. And that's not racist to discriminate against some groups over others. It's about creating an equitable playing field. And I think we're on the right trajectory, but I do think that we are now at a point where we have to recognize that need for equity. And as Rashika says, it's that moving from inclusion to belonging. And that requires personal responsibility and a real sense of duty in my own space to maximize what I can do to help.
Thank you so much, Julie. Rashika, Marina, would you like to add to this?
I would, very briefly, because I had so many things to say yet. And on this representation versus visibility that Rashika brought up. So it's not because you have a black actor in your movie that you're actually talking about what being a black person is. We have a pink money, not a term that designates a consumption, a power of LGBT segments that represent a global order of $3.7 billion. And that doesn't mean that we're being as LGBT actually represented. So brands have visibility and have rainbow products on June because of the sexual diversity, but we're still in 71 countries in the world, a demonstration of consensual relations between people of the same sex. It's a criminal, it's punished with a criminal law. And in 9 of those with the capital, with the death penalty. So when Rashika talks about accessing, and after accessing, belonging. So how is the day by day of LGBT and Black people in this company, in this environment? Can I talk about my weekend with my wife and my family, and with the same naturality that my heterosexual friends talk? So it's not to be surprised with the fact that 73% of LGBT that are not assumed and not out are more likely to leave their employment than heterosexual people. So one thing I would really like to close in with is that we often place ourselves apart from any discriminatory behavior, saying things like, oh, I don't do that, I will never do that, I even have a gay brother or a friend. But the truth is that we cannot set ourselves apart from our own culture. We are actually a part of it. But it's not because it is a systematic discrimination or a systematic inequality of power that you can do anything about it. We're not in Mars, we are here. And we indeed find ourselves in this racist, sexist, cisgender, heteronormative, environmental, unfriendly society. So how can we be responsible for any of that? And look, I am an academic researcher. I don't make this affirmation based on my opinion. Actually, I make this affirmation based on science and evidence, something that appears to be so old-fashioned nowadays. I say that because I can prove with statistics that that these are power dynamics directly affect women, Black, LGBT, people with disability, indigenous people, either by showing employment, education, range, or even violence figures on which one of these groups and other oppressed as refugees and religious minorities. But you can't blame those discriminated for the oppression that afflicts them. As I said, we are part of this structure, and although it is systemic, it has everything to do with which one of us individually. So it's easy to say that this is my company's problem or the government's problem, and I can't solve, placing on others the responsibility. So, and then really to close, when we're talking about diversity and inclusion policies, there is no final goal here. There is no finishing line. The goal is the process itself. I can study all it is reachable about race. I will still go to bed with the privileges that come attached to being white in Brazil. And I will still wake up white as well. So no matter how educated about race I am, I will still not experience the disadvantages and barriers that come attached to being a Black person in Brazil. That is the same way with organizations. You can apply the best gender and diversity compliance policies, you still can be responsible for their part actions, as you are doing everything in your power to avoid misconduct, from access to belonging, to thriving and ascending and rising in the company. There is something your company can improve. But also, how can I be a better version of myself in this debate and actually self-implicate myself, self-imply myself on this restructure by looking every day on the mirror and stepping down to listen and understand where you can improve.
Thank you so much, Marina. Thank you so much. And I think that what I would like to ask for Rashika is maybe if she can comment in like in a very short way so that we can. Sorry. Yeah, this is a very interesting discussion, and I'm so it's so unfortunate that we're restricted by time. But Rashika, can we have your a final comment on this? Yes, please.
Absolutely. I have 4 points succinctly because I had the benefit of excellent orators before me. My number one takeaway that I wanted to say today: everybody can make a difference if they want to. Honesty. Vote. Mentor. Really, we need financial and knowledge resources with minorities, for example. Be curious. Maybe go out and eat at that restaurant that you spend complaining about, the smell that's coming from there. You know, speak up. The children especially need that. We need, as adults, to speak up. So in the public transport, wherever you see, speak up. That costs nothing. Give space to others. And one of the problems is that the voices are being drowned out. So give those spaces for those experiences and reflect, as Marina said. Create islands of sanity. right? Through changed leadership. That's from Margaret Wheatley. So if we have clusters of people, Marina's crew in Brazil, and you guys in Turkey, and then in London, Paula and Gilly, we can really hopefully merge those islands at some point, right? And in terms of any initiative that you're taking, make them practical steps that you can do now. Not like whenever later for some goal, as Marina said, there is no such thing, right? And then the last thing is that for Pete's sake, listen to Gilly, who said that you have privilege. People have privilege, myself included. Remember that this exercise that you're doing of reflection, you can always take a break from it, right? Some people cannot. And that is all I want to say. Thank you guys for a wonderful discussion. You made my heart smile today, honestly.
Thank you so much to you too. And to all our speakers, actually. And as I said, I mean, this is so valuable in information, and there is so much for all of us to do. And I know that all our audience has so many takeaways from this discussion. That is, I mean, it's about a topic that is really lively. It's topical. It's in our daily lives, and it's all on us to make the change based on the valuable information that we've received from all of you. And then as a final point, I would like to ask our president, Paola, if she has any words to address us on this topic.
Just two really short points. First of all of you have talked about being grateful. Well, I'm enormously grateful that the three of you accepted our invitation to join us today. So thank you so much. And the second point is, I think if we take nothing else away from today's discussion, then let's remember the analogy about the dance. It's something that we do so much in AIJA, and I think it's very easy for us to remember it. So remember the idea of diversity as the invitation to come to the dance, the inclusion, inviting everybody to dance, and then the belonging, actually wanting to dance. And I think that is probably the best way in which to remember this wonderful session that we've had today. Thank you so much.